Hey, what's up, YouTube? We're back with another video. Today's video, we'll be discussing the ILLUMINATE front and primary weapons that are good, bad, and just need some love. Just remember that this is a 4-player co-op oriented tier list, so we will not be discussing a primary weapon from like a solo perspective. I'm going to assume that you have some amount of teammates backing you up and just in general, that kind of strategy necessary. Also keep in mind that when I am looking at these weapons, I try to look at them from like one singular weapon at a time, and I'm not taking outside factors too much into account, and I will discuss them if I am. So like siege ready armor is particularly amazing on certain weapons, but I'm going to assume that we're not taking it because it would be unfair in that position. Or like flame resistance for the double-edged sickle would be another example. Okay, let's get into it. All the way at the top, we have the base Liberator. I think this is like the antithesis of like mid or middle of the pack, just solid. The ILLUMINATE front in general doesn't demand special things as much. It does benefit if you have like medium pen, so all of a sudden you can deal with like overseers or be able to take out a harvester effectively. But as far as light pen goes, very serviceable. You'll just want to look for medium pen or explosive damage somewhere else in your loadout for maybe a flesh mob or a harvester. So Liberator typically just immediately goes to my mid tier because it has a 60 round magazine and like good overall attachments and stuff like that. It just feels good. It's not like some C tier weapon or anything like that. You can easily go through a mission with the Liberator, base Liberator, and take out voteless and overseers and your watchers, and you can do decent overall damage to a flesh mob. It's just not recommended overall. It's more of like a I'm already doing some damage with something else, or my teammates are doing damage, I'm helping kind of situation. Okay, next we go to the Liberator Penetrator. Honestly, a fantastic early game weapon for many players when they're first starting out. The medium pen, you do sacrifice some overall like early damage, but you gain it back if you are hitting the correct spots. Light armor, so you end up doing 35% more damage to light armor pen. If you overmatch the armor that you're shooting at, you actually end up doing more damage than if you were just shooting light armor with light armor pen. So that you can make up for that deficit pretty fast with the Liberator Penetrator. Great for going for headshots versus overseers. Great for harvester legs. You can in fact kill a harvester with the Liberator Penetrator, which is very useful. It wouldn't be like my go-to weapon to kill a harvester, but it is an effective one. So I think it's like a solid A+, not quite S tier. I feel like to some extent it's being a little bit power crept. We're going to talk about the Coyote a little bit later, but in general, it's a solid, very solid weapon, but it's not your like all around best bet, if that makes sense. Not necessarily a bad option at all. Next, we have the Liberator Concussive, decent CC. I do wish it was a little bit more effective at like stun locking maybe a flush mob, but it can be pretty good at stopping like an elevated overseer or something along those lines from bullying you consistently. It does come with the 60 round mags by default, which is okay, but I'm not like going crazy over this weapon. I think some people might really like it for like team play and just supporting your team, but I think killing outright with your weapon is usually better than just CC in a lot of these situations. It's pretty rare to find where like CC actually ends up being better than just outright destroying the enemy. Okay, next we have the StA-52. This is the kill zone weapon. No attachments, light pen, very similar to the regular Liberator. Don't really recommend it all that much. It feels all right, but now that like the regular Liberator has like the 60 round magazine, it matters way less that you have a 56 round magazine on the StA-52. It's just kind of a Liberator in different skin. If you really like the appearance of it, all power to you, but I don't think it's actually that good of a gun. It's like C tier. It actually does go down a grade just because the Liberator honestly just has the better attachments, and it will feel like more of a laser beam. You don't have to worry about recoil. You can put a scope on it. You can't put a scope on this thing. It's just iron sights that you can see right there. It's C tier. Maybe one day they'll get some love. Killzone weapons in general definitely feel like they need something. Next, we're going to go to the Pacifier. We have a medium pen stun weapon. Fantastic overall weapon to mess around with if you're just like looking to like see things, but the lower damage you will feel. And ever since they changed the status effect build up, there was a bug. If you were in 4-player co-op, you applied the stun effect like 4 times, so you would instantly stun things. Now it's not as fast, and the lower damage doesn't really compensate because it is quite a bit lower durable damage, so you're not like destroying parts and stuff like that as effectively. You can in fact kill a harvester, and you can in fact kill a an Overseer pretty effectively overall in the head, but it's not something I'm really going to recommend. And you're like stunning a flesh mob takes a lot of rounds. And if they enrage, I'm fairly certain you can't stun them after that. So it's like a B-. I do think it's better than the other alternatives, mostly just because it's medium pen at least. So it is a little bit more effective, but it's not too much more. Okay, next, we're gonna leave the Coyote for a little bit afterwards, but next we have the Liberator Carbine. This is an assault rifle from the Viper Commando Warbond. Many people call it the mini stalwart or something along those lines, or like an alternative to the Knight SMG. I think it is a rather nice overall AR. Many people also like to talk about it as just like a straight up upgrade over the Liberator, especially with the changes to the Liberator being able to like have like way better like recoil reduction attachments. So like here I'm putting on the compensator and I have the vertical foregrip. It becomes a little bit of a laser beam, which is really nice for dropping overseers really fast. And you can put some serious damage into flesh mobs in a small amount of time. It does take a lot of ammo to do that, but you can in fact do that. Just remember when you're shooting at an overseer, pick one body part and shoot at it. You want to break the armor on that because it's like a carapace, and then you shoot the black skin, I guess, underneath that carapace armor. It works way better than if you like spread all the damage across the entire body. You can drop them so much faster doing it that way. But anyways, Liberator Carbine I think is like B+. It is definitely a mark above that of the normal Liberator, but I have a hard time wanting to value it higher and like go into the A tier. It might at the end of the tier list go to like maybe somewhere like the A- territory, but overall I'm not as big of a fan as like Tenderizer, for instance. I do prefer to use the Tenderizer over the Liberator Carbine overall, but that's like personal preference territory. Like I do think that you could like switch out these two depending on preference. I just particularly like being able to do that extra damage per shot, gaining the extra damage, going up 25 damage with the Tenderizer. I find the accuracy of the Tenderizer to be really high without having to have this crazy fire rate, because something that you notice with crazy fire rate is that you overshoot and you waste a lot of ammo because a dead enemy, you won't like perceive that he just like fell over and died fast enough. So you may end up like overshooting and shooting a couple extra rounds, and it adds up over time. But Tenderizer, I don't feel like that as much. I do like putting it in burst fire. It's very accurate, great attachments on it. It would be nice if it at least got like a 35 to 40 round magazine, 45 round magazine. I think 35 is just a little too low at the moment, but I do like it overall. And that being said, like, you know, maybe I'll just put the Liberator Carbine right next to it because I do think it's interchangeable. Okay, next we have the Adjudicator. The Adjudicator is very similar to the Liberator Penetrator, but it's more damage per shot at a slower fire rate with a smaller magazine. So some people will prefer just like burst firing or like tap firing with the Adjudicator over like the full auto spam that you'll probably need when you're using the Liberator Penetrator. I find it to be somewhere like, I don't think it's as good as the Liberator Penetrator, but it's in close proximity. Like the Tenderizer, if it got that bigger magazine attachment, all of a sudden it went to like 45 rounds or something along those lines, then I think it would be like right in there next to the Liberator Penetrator as far as like usability. But on like a horde enemy type like the ILLUMINATE, magazine size will matter in a lot of situations when you're comparing it to an alternative of that. The only reason the Tenderizer tends to be a little bit more favorable in my opinion is just because it's so accurate and it has the extra damage, which I think is more meaningful there. The Adjudicator, you have to trade off a lot of that damage with a lot of extra recoil, and it will make you want to use like different attachments. Okay, next we have the Halo MA5C assault rifle. Fun weapon. It's somewhere close to the Adjudicator and the Liberator Penetrator. It falls somewhere in this niche in between, as you can see from the damage stats, down from 95 to 80, and then you get a little bit more magazine capacity, but obviously not nearly as much as the Liberator Penetrator. The recoil is obviously less than the Adjudicator, but not that much less, but you get a little more fire rate. I think it's like an A-. The big reason why I still think it's up here is just medium pen plus like decent damage. Just be careful. The magazine size can feel quite small if you're just like full autoing it all the time. The lack of sights is another reason why I'm not going to put it as high in the A tier. Sights are super important to you. It's probably closer to a B tier weapon, so keep that in mind. Okay, next we have the Coyote. The Coyote is something that has just kind of made assault rifles in general just feel not as good because it just kind of power crept them all. It is medium pen pen, 75 damage, which is quite high for a medium pen weapon. It has good fire rate at 600, and kicker is the incendiary ammo. The recoil is not that bad at all, only 12 with a vertical foregrip, and you can put a flashlighter or some kind of thing on it. Oof, it's disgusting. It's going to be our first S tier. It's probably going to be closer to S- by the end of it. We'll discuss why a little bit later, but it's insane. Being able to light a overseer on fire after like 5 shots, the 5 shots will do a bunch of damage and the fire will finish it off. Being able to one tap voteless very easily by lighting them on fire if you don't get the one tap on their head or on their leg or something like that. Flesh mobs, you're very effective versus flesh mobs because you can light them on fire more so than any other assault rifle. When it comes to the harvesters, although you don't have like as much durable damage as you would like with like an adjudicator, you're lighting them on fire, which definitely equals it out, and it feels very effective against even the largest enemies. Highly recommend using the Coyote, as you probably already have heard. No surprise here, it's incredibly good. Okay, next, going to our marksman rifles, we have the Amendment. This is a personal favorite of mine. I really like it on this faction. The extra durable damage of the Amendment, great handling, decent magazine size. It says 29 recoil, and it seems like that, oh my god, that's so high. In practice, at least in semi-auto, it doesn't feel like that. Highly recommend just like giving it a crouch. Good overall ergonomics, 50 ergonomics with my current loadout, but you know, if you need that 4x, you know, you drop to 44, and that's not bad at all. Really like it. I spam fire it. Overseers, drop them really fast. You do quite respectable damage to flesh mobs just because of the raw damage of it, and you can do the damage per second quite fast. Obviously, you're not going to be dealing with the harvesters as much, but I think that's a small price to pay for how good it feels versus other enemies. I love double tapping watchers with it. It's just overall like a really fun weapon, and I'm going to put it like middle A. Also, with the bayonet attachment, the bayonet really helps with like voteless. Like if you just don't want to take the extra time to shoot, or if like you just empty the magazine, you got a voteless in front of you, quick little melee, very effective at one-shotting them. Highly recommend. Okay, next we go on to the Constitution. Constitution is obviously the quote-unquote meme weapon, but I think if you have like good enough accuracy overall, it actually becomes like a solid beer weapon. I genuinely think that, and a lot of people obviously will argue with me, but with enough accuracy, I think it's actually like a pretty solid weapon. Good ammo economy, you got the bayonet. You're obviously not going to be taking on like flesh mobs and stuff like that, but it's at least medium pen, so it can do like some nice things with enough aim versus overseers, and you can be like plinking away at a harvester and eventually kill them, which a lot of the weapons around may not be able to do. So it can at least do something like that. Okay, next, going on to the Deadeye. The Deadeye, because it's a faction that is more horde-like with all of the voteless, it's not going to feel nearly as good because of the 8 capacity, unfortunately. But what is nice about the Deadeye is that if you just remember to reload after like every shot, the rounds reloaded can feel very nice. The upfront damage allows you to one tap overseers in the head. So if you're like someone who just loves being precise and you bring like a guard dog or something like that, I love just like walking around one tapping. It is very effective versus harvesters, you know, going for that leg shot, pick one leg, lay into them, not too bad at all. It's not going to be great against a flesh mob, but it's so good against the rest of the faction. I do think it's like a solid A tier, even though the magazine size, it's probably going to be like closer to the bottom of A, but I do think it performs quite well in its duties, and it's like one taps watchers very effectively. So if you're having trouble stopping those Illumina drops happening, I do think the Deadeye is a solid option for that. Next, going to the Diligence, 165 damage, good capacity, decent recoil. It's just an all-around good weapon, but it doesn't impress me like I would with a typical AR. I would rather have a little more fire rate when dealing with the Illumina faction, but by no means is it like a bad weapon or anything. It's definitely closer to the top of B+ and like bottom of A-, but it's getting a little crowded in the A tier, so I think I'm going to mostly stick it to B+. Solid weapon though, highly recommend. Never really used it since the beginning of the game. It can be a fun weapon, an alternative. All right, Diligence Counter Sniper is an alternative to the Amendment. Very similar stats as far as durable damage and raw damage, but it has the medium pen versus the light pen. I really like the Diligence Counter Sniper as like the go-to weapon that I use for if I want a primary weapon that can deal with a harvester, because it's like just slightly over 1 mag on average to take out a harvester. If you like miss a couple shots, it's going to be like 1 and a bit, but like it's very effective at taking them out. You'll need probably 2 mags if you have to deal with the shield first, then shoot the leg, but I like it quite a bit. On my current loadout, I have it mostly built for like higher ergonomics, because it can be pretty rough if you outlie it. If you put like the 10x or even the 4x, you put like a vertical foregrip on it, and then on top of it, you put like a muzzle brake or something. I could see some amount of an argument for like maybe affecting the vertical recoil a little bit, going for angle foregrip instead for a little bit of an ergonomic ergonomics boost. I'm still hoping that the Diligence counter sniper gets a little love in the ergonomics department, just because it's feeling a little sluggish and things around it are just gaining so much ergonomics. Like the average weapon around the Diligence counter sniper is so much more. Like even the Eruptor ends up feeling better because it actually has more ergonomics. And I don't think that should be the case. Eruptor should definitely feel worse than the Diligence counter sniper. It shouldn't feel that bad. So hoping for a little bit of a change to the Diligence counter sniper. But that being said, it's still absolutely a fantastic weapon for the Illuminate faction. Yeah, it's not as good for like ad clear, but if you're like precise at dealing with overseers and you mag dump like very effectively versus harvesters, this thing could be like an all-arounder. It's not going to be great versus your flesh mobs, but you can still like full auto fire it quite fast. It says 350 fire rate, but I think you can tap fire it even faster. I believe in you. Next, going to the Knight SMG. Just a fun, really fun weapon to use ever since the changes to it. You're getting a 70 round magazine, fairly fast fire rate. The recoil is extremely low, especially with the attachments that you can put on it. Honestly, just yet another A tier weapon. Don't worry, we're putting some weapons elsewhere further in, but solid SMG that you can mess around with on the Illuminate front. Feels good. You're not really dealing with your harvesters, but it actually can fry a flesh mob in like 2 mags, and you can deal that damage really fast. So like you can like spray down a flesh mob as he's coming from you on the front. You like step around him as he misses like running at you, and then you spray him in the back and he's dead. It's really cool for using it in that situation. Next, we have 2 of the more disappointing SMGs. We have the StA-11 and the M7S. Kind of rate them together. I think the M7S is like bottom of B, and the StA-11 is like, actually I'm being too kind to the Halo SMG. I'm gonna put it like C tier and then D tier. The StA-11 is kind of just an alternative to the M7S, but the M7S is more controllable in my opinion. It's like far easier to use. To some extent, it's because it has a lower fire rate and less recoil, whereas the StA-11 has more recoil and more fire rate. So when you're using the StA-11, you either overshoot or you just like kind of miss a bunch of bullets, whereas this M7S, it's easier to hit your shots, and the suppress, if it actually is working, can be decent in that situation. But I do think the StA-11 probably is overall the worst primary weapon we have, in my opinion. It's great versus like, I guess like an overseer that's like directly right in front of you, or like a flesh mob that is like right in front of you and you just want to mag dump. It doesn't have much ammo though, or like a bunch of vote lists that's right in front of you, but you're probably going to waste a bunch of ammo on those vote lists. It's just not my favorite. All right, so next for the Reprimand, that is more or less an assault rifle in the SMG slot. I love this thing. Just feels good overall. Like it feels like just a different alternative to the Adjudicator in many respects. You'll get a slower fire rate, but you'll get more damage. You'll get less range, but you'll get more damage. You'll get less capacity, but you'll get less damage. And like fully comparing it to the Adjudicator, it's an alternative to the Adjudicator. If you want something that like just feels a little different and maybe packs a little more punch per bullet, Reprimand's right there. Just be aware that because of the bullet velocity, it will lose a lot of damage over range, and you have a pretty small magazine, but still very high performant in the Illuminate front. Next, we have the Defender. It kind of feels like the Liberator, but I would not use it over the Liberator. I would rather use the Liberator than the Defender. I kind of wish one-handed weapons had more of a purpose in this game. We've talked about this before. It's decent on this front. It just does its damage very slowly because it only has a 520 round per minute and it has the damage of 80. It's very accurate and it does have a very large magazine, but still wish that one-handed just felt more useful in this game. It just doesn't, and I would rather use the ARs just for like that damage over range and like better attachment versatility. Next, we go on to the Pummeler. I'm gonna kind of put it just right next to the Liberator Concussive. I kind of go all over the place with the Liberator Concussive versus the Pummeler. They're more or less very similar to one another. The Liberator Concussive is more about knocking back enemies, whereas the Pummeler is more about stunning enemies. It just kind of depends on your perspective on like, would you rather knock back an enemy or stun an enemy? You can in fact stun lock a flesh mob, but they can get enraged and then they kind of get knocked out of that and they become a lot harder to stun, it seems. The attachment system did help it, there's no doubt, going up to the 75 round magazine. I don't have it here, but it does have it. But the even slower fire rate and the very slow muzzle velocity of the Pummeler make it very hard to use at like 50 meters. And for like those like elevated overseers, it can be honestly quite hard to like hit them. So in that situation, it's like I probably just prefer to use the Liberator Concussive. Pummeler's in a weird spot as well. Okay, next, going to our shotguns, we have the Punisher. So solid. Tons of stagger, good damage, especially if you put the full choke on it. You can have some decent range. Enemies that you're shooting at will not be able to shoot back at you. You'll knock things back. Good damage, solid B tier. If you're ever looking for a shotgun that you just want to like use and not really have to think too much about, shotgun. That's what the Punisher more or less is. Next, we have the Halo shotgun. Is very much similar to like a lot of the legendary Warbond weapons. It's an alternative of something else, alternative to the Punisher. You do more upfront damage, which can be very useful for, let's say, a flesh mob, but it's less accurate. But the rounds reloaded, like it does have like a smaller capacity, obviously, like by 10, but it doesn't mean that much when you just remember, reload. Don't fully empty the capacity. Just like fire 5 shots off, reload. Fire 5 shots off, reload. Or shot, reload, shot, reload, shot, reload. It's a bottomless maggot at that point. And I would recommend. M90A does feel nice versus Illuminate. I do enjoy it. It's mid, but it's good. Okay, next going to the Slugger. I like using Slugger. It's very similar to the Deadeye though, but it's the Deadeye with less overall range because the bullet drop off and the damage over time, or like damage over distance, will be a lot lower because the muzzle velocity is lower. It's definitely like for closer range, whereas the Deadeye is more for mid to long range, but you can definitely use the Slugger just like you would the Deadeye. 16 round capacity and the fire rate is slower, but you get rounds reloaded with a larger capacity, which I think makes it more usable in the Illuminate front, but your mileage may vary. I'm putting it a little bit higher than the Deadeye, but depending on preference, you might prefer one or the other. Next, we go to the Halt. The Halt is your flechette and EMS round shotgun. It is still like a proper shotgun spread. It's not a slug, so range is a factor, but I do like using it, but it's more or less, I would say, close to the Punisher. I would rather use like the Slugger for like that more distance, and you do lose quite a bit of damage, and medium pen doesn't matter that much if you can't accurately hit targets at like decent range. Shooting at like an Overseer with the Halt doesn't make that much of a difference unless you're very close and you can get those flechette rounds to actually hit the target up close. The stun is very useful, but it depends on how good you are at swapping back and forth the ammo. If you're not particularly great at like swapping between the ammo, it's not going to be that very useful to you. Not like a terrible choice or anything like that, but it could feel better if it was easier to swap between. Okay, next we go to the Cookout. Bit of a tough one. I don't think it's as good as the Coyote because it lacks the medium pen, but I do think it is like teetering on that like position between like A+, S-, but the Coyote really does just kind of like increase above it. I do prefer the Punisher against Overseers, for instance. If Overseers are a huge problem for you, I do prefer the Cookout over them because it's very consistently like one shot, light them on fire, wait till it stops burning, one shot again, they fall over because the fire instance 2 times kills them. So in that situation, maybe you would prefer the Cookout. You also don't have to be nearly as accurate, obviously, with the Cookout over the Coyote. Coyote, you have to be accurate. With the Cookout, you can miss a little bit more because of the shotgun spread nature of the weapon. So a little bit of personal preference, but I think because of the medium pen, I will prefer the Coyote. Next, we go to the Standard Breaker. The Standard Breaker, great for just like mag dumping flesh mobs in front of you. The ammo economy on it is not particularly great, but honestly, I had a fun time leveling this up to 25 against the Illuminate almost exclusively. It was fun. Put the full choke on it. I actually used the short mags because I rarely needed more than just the short mags, and the short mags reload speed is so fast. Felt really nice. And if I ever had like half a mag left, I didn't feel nearly as guilty about reloading because you're not wasting nearly as much ammo as if you had a drum mag that was half filled. So that's just a personal preference. I really liked the short mags for like that snappiness of the ergo as well. I think it's like okay, like middle B situation, you know, light pen plus the fact that like it doesn't have a crazy amount of range is more or less why it's there. The ammo economy on it is a bit rough, but it's not that bad. It's on the lower side of B though. Okay, next we go to the Spray&Pray. Personally, I also leveled this weapon against Illuminate. I didn't like it. Between the two, I much prefer the Breaker. Yes, the Spray&Pray has a better ammo economy than the Breaker, but all you get versus the Breaker is you lose damage, you get 10% fire rate, and you get some more extra magazines in reserve, but I don't think that's worth it. I would much rather have like a weapon that has a harder to have ammo economy, but deal way more damage up front. Finding ammo, especially on the Illuminate front, is not that bad. There's a lot of just random ammo falling around. As you just get better at the game, you'll get better at just finding ammo. So it's not that big of a deal that you just don't have as good of an ammo economy, because it just takes so much longer to kill something when you have the Spray&Pray. Yes, the 10% faster fire rate does make a difference. That extra damage that you lose is way bigger. Like it's like, look at that. That's a massive amount of damage. It's 90 damage. That's insane. I don't know. Personally, I'm not a Spray&Pray enjoyer. I'm going to put that right down in C tier. I would rather not use it. It's great versus voteless, but like, dude, everything is good versus voteless. It doesn't matter what you're using. It even Constitution is good versus the voteless to some extent. Just one tap their legs or melee them. I don't know. Spray&Pray isn't that much better at killing voteless for me to like value it big time. And just killing an overseer with this thing is so painful. I just did not like it. Okay, next, going to the Incendiary Breaker. The Incendiary Breaker is very similar to the normal Breaker, but you lose some damage, which is okay because you gain Incendiary. Similar to the Cookout, one shot to light them on fire, let them burn, second shot to finish them off. I typically use the full choke on the Illuminate. I was using duckbill for the bugs, but that's a different story. I like using full choke on the Incendiary Breaker on the Illuminate just so those elevated overseers aren't such a pain and I don't have to use as much ammo to light them on fire. Great versus flesh mobs, obviously, because you can light them on fire. They take a ton of fire damage. Great for dealing with voteless, because obviously one instance of fire is enough to finish them off. So it ends up being a better voteless killer than those Spray&Pray. And for that reason, I'm going to put it like the bottom of A-. It's basically just like the Cookout is the better one because it has stagger. It's a little bit easier to keep your ammo economy up, but if you need the damage per second, you go with the Incendiary Breaker. I just feel like a lot of people will prefer the ammo economy on the Cookout, even though you have more total shots on the Incendiary Breaker. A lot of people spam fire the Incendiary Breaker and they run out so fast, and I just always tell them, tap fire. Light enemies on fire. That's like your biggest goal. It's just to light enemies on fire. You're not trying to outright kill them with the pellets of the Incendiary Breaker, but it's just way easier to use the Cookout just because of the stagger. The Incendiary Breaker does not have that. Next, going to our two support weapons, I mean explosive weapons. They're easily all the way up in S tier. There's no doubt in my mind, just insanely good versus voteless, insanely good versus overseers. A little bit harder to hit the elevated overseers, but you'll get used to it. Insanely good at flesh mobs. You can kill multiple, even with like a couple shots if they're standing close to each other, and you can start killing harvesters or at least bullying them a lot with these weapons. They're pretty explosive immune, but at least the shrapnel of the Eruptor makes it plow through. The crossbow is obviously not as good versus the harvester because it's not dealing nearly as much shrapnel damage, because obviously it has some impact damage, but the majority of it is explosive. So I would probably prefer and recommend the Eruptor. The Eruptor is technically in the S+ tier, whereas the crossbow is more like S tier. Okay, next, going to a forgotten soul, that is the Punisher Plasma. It just kind of bullies enemies. If one shot could easily one tap a group of voteless, I would much prefer the Punisher Plasma, but it often takes two shots. It is pretty inefficient at killing overseers and more or less just bullies them. It's not that great at killing flesh mobs compared to other explosive weapons. It is obviously better than raw damage primaries, but because explosive damage is so useful on the Illuminate front, I'm at least going to put it in B, but feel like this weapon could be so much better. It's just been power crept so much by other weapons around it. Okay, next we go to the Killzone Accelerator Rifle. This one's actually very unique for a legendary crossover. It got a lot better when they fixed the damage fall off. It is actually pretty nice versus flesh mobs. It can destroy them pretty nicely. You can snipe overseer legs pretty decently now that it has like good damage over range. Yeah, the only thing it sucks at obviously is dealing with your voteless, and it does suck that it doesn't one burst overseers. If you try to go for headshots with it, the first shot will flinch them and the second two shots will probably miss, unfortunately, but still decent. I will put it like middle B because at least it's like quite effective versus some of the enemies. You're just gonna probably want something else in your loadout for dealing with voteless. Dealing with like stingrays and harvesters and flesh mobs, pretty good. I would give it another try if you haven't in some time. Blitzer, solid, super solid. Range is obviously a factor with the Blitzer, but it's just so easy to use that it's hard for me not to want to put it up there. Really good CC, keeping them locked down, especially those elevated overseers. You don't really have to worry about aim versus voteless. You just have unlimited ammo. You just hold left click. It's gonna kill things. Not great versus flesh mobs, which is why it's not any higher than like A-, and you're obviously not going to use it versus a Harvester, but hey, it's really good against the lower tier enemies and it's very low effort, so it ends up being a lot of people's meta. It can feel pretty meta for like people that just don't want to aim. It's quite effective. All right, the Scythe has had a little bit of an up and down in the last couple of months. Obviously, you got the better attachment for like the longer fire time, which is really cool, but obviously at the same time, it's a little bit harder at lighting enemies on fire. I was valuing it a lot higher like a month ago for the status effect changes. We'll see if they change it again. The weapon still has that very weird zoom situation going on, so if you go first person and you increase the zoom, the weapon moves away from you. You're still gaining zoom, but it's moving away from you, which is really awkward. I'm gonna put it like somewhere in like B tier. It's like decent. It's like a limited ammo. It's decent at killing harvesters. It can be pretty good against overseers, especially if you're like good at lighting them on fire. But obviously it's light pen, so you're not going to get the utility of killing the higher tier enemies. So yeah, it resides somewhere in the B tier. I think it's okay. Yeah, somewhere middle B. Okay, the Sickle, fan favorite, but I do think it is slowly being power crept by lots of things around it. It used to be solid A tier and even sometimes higher depending on the tier list, but I think it resides more in the B plus tier now because the damage is starting to fall off pretty hard. It does have low recoil and unlimited ammo, but I find that there's so much ammo availability on the Illuminate, I'm not valuing that as much. And because it doesn't have the fire damage proc of like the Scythe, it's not going to be as good against like a flesh mob, for instance. So yeah, I'm going to put it like somewhere probably next to the Scythe. It's just like an alternative. If you want more like upfront damage, you go with the Sickle because it will do better damage per second versus like a Harvester or like more upfront damage to like a Voteless. But if you're trying to deal with like a flesh mob, the Scythe ends up being better. Okay, the Sickle, the double-edged Sickle. This one's always a really tough one for me to place in the tier list just because if you invest in it, it becomes insane. If you don't invest in it, it feels very mid. If you don't invest in it, it's probably like a B minus C tier. But if you invest in it, it can easily feel like an A tier weapon, if not even higher at times. If you like really invest in it, if you bring like fire resistant armor, doesn't matter which type, vitality, and like a supply backpack, this thing will feel like a support weapon. But you need those three factors to make it feel like a support weapon. And for that reason, I think I'm going to put it right next to the other energy weapons. Just like keep in mind that like it's a lot worse if you don't put any investment in it, but I'm assuming you're at least maybe bringing the vitality and maybe you're going to have a decent amount of stims or the supply backpack with something else. But that's assuming you brought that stuff. If you don't, it'll feel C tier. Keep that in mind. Okay, we have the Scorcher. The Scorcher is honestly like incredibly good. It's just ammo is like obviously a concern with it. It is an aluminum mission, so there's going to be a decent amount of ammo everywhere, but even then, ammo is still a concern. It is very effective versus like flesh mobs and overseers. Doesn't require much accuracy because of it being explosive. Doesn't feel amazing versus Voteless because like having to use one shot per Voteless is pretty ineffective, so you'll probably want something else. But just because of like ease of use and just how good it is against flesh mobs, solid A tier. You're not killing Voteless with it all too often, but at least higher tier enemies, you can deal a lot of damage to them, especially it's like one magging your flesh mobs. So a lot of people I find tend to use this alongside like an AMR layout because it's like when you are using the AMR, typically like going for precision shots on like harvesters or dealing with overseers and things like that. But like AMR, not a great option versus flesh mobs. You bring this instead. It works out really well. And you'll have lots of ammo because you're probably already bringing the supply backpack to go with the AMR. Okay, next we go to the Purifier. This weapon is quite insane versus the Illuminate faction. I think it is like solid A minus or S minus tier. Very good versus Voteless, very good versus overseers, very good versus your harvesters, very good versus your flesh mobs. But the harvesters, it's a bit awkward though. You're more or less just kind of bullying them around. Probably still want to bring something to kill a harvester with your like more standard medium pen because like I said with the crossbow, you can kill one, but it has to require like a lot of precision and like hitting, and like you're gonna lose out a lot of damage because a lot of the damage of the Purifier is in fact explosive damage. But the nice like change of fire rate, if you just tap fire versus holding it down, is a benefit over the crossbow for some people. So keep that in mind. But you're not objective killing. You know, you're not taking care of UFOs with the Purifier, whereas you are crossbow. So pros and cons in that regard. Okay, next we go to the variable. Fun weapon to use on the Illuminate. Obviously the full auto fire for your Voteless, the shotgun for your overseers and stuff like that. And then like the total round is like pretty good for just like all out damage versus a flesh mob. And if you're precise enough, I particularly kind of suck at like one-shotting harvesters with it, but you can do it. If you get really good at it, props to you. Take out the shield first and then like probably reload reload after taking out the shield, and then like total damage right to the eye, you can get pretty good at it. I've seen some people get pretty good at it. So it's a bit of a gimmicky weapon, but solid. It's got some utility here and there. The ergonomics is probably what kind of leads to it not going like any higher, and the fact that it's like light pen and not medium pen. It is a bit too gimmicky at times, and I think the gimmicky side of it is a bit hard to utilize, which is why I prefer like other light pen weapons over it. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh to the variable. Let me know in the comments down below. I'd be curious to know if you prefer it way more than me, but I think putting in B+, teetering on A-, I think is like pretty fair. Next, we have the Torcher, very effective versus the horde enemies that's gonna come at you in the Illuminate faction. Quite nice versus your flesh mobs. Just be careful not to light yourself on fire when they're running at you. But honestly, I think it's like a good, solid weapon to bring. Range is a factor. Obviously, you dealing damage to yourself is a factor. And it's not always gonna feel the best against like a Watcher that's like about to call in reinforcements and you just don't have the range for it. But hopefully you brought something else in your loadout to necessarily bring and deal with them. Elevated overseers are kind of going to be your bane of your existence with the Torture. That's why I'm not putting any higher, because like every time I bring the Torture and I don't have something else to deal with those guys, Torture just it just doesn't feel great. But what some people do is they bring like MG-43, and that deals with like harvesters and elevated overseers, and they use the Torture for like all the mobbing for like normal overseers, voteless, and stuff like that. So I do think it's a fairly effective weapon versus the Illuminate faction, and it can feel support like and almost even better than your flamethrower at times. Okay, next we go to the Dominator. I'm still a huge fan of the Dominator on the Illuminate front. One tapping voteless right to the chest very effectively. One tapping overseers to the head if you're accurate with it. This thing absolutely melts harvesters if you're able to hit their leg. You can one mag them pretty damn easily and do it quite fast if you're fast at tap firing it. Flesh mobs do get kind of destroyed by this thing. It will take obviously more than one magazine, but you can mag dump them and deal some good damage. I just like using it a lot. I do think it's fallen out of S tier where I used to be able to put it up there, but I do think it's like still a very effective weapon. Just super fun to use, the bolter of this game. As far as my attachments, I like to go for lots of ergonomics, so I go iron sight with no underbarrel. I find angle foregrip increases the recoil too much for my liking, so when I'm spam firing it at like a harvester leg, I would rather have no barrel than an angle foregrip, because just remember, it adds a lot of recoil when you have an angle foregrip. Anyways, that is our tier list as it stands at the moment. Let me just quickly look over to make sure that I haven't like placed anything that I feel like is just oddly placed. I do think that the Tenderizer should come down out of that like A+ tier. I think the amendment deserves to be where it is. Just keep in mind for the Deadeye, it has to do with a lot of precision. It won't feel always that good against like a lot of the voteless, but I'm hoping that you can either rounds reload very effectively and consistently, or like you're just bringing something else to deal with that. Just keep that in mind that like it might be a lot lower for you if you're having trouble with the precision. Variable, I might be being a bit tough on. Halt, I think I'm pretty fair on, just because like it is pretty annoying to swap between those fire modes. Remember, for the DE Sickle, the DE Sickle does have a lot of investment opportunity in it, and if you invest in it, it will pay off. Don't, it is pretty damn rough. Killzone Sniper, pretty high up there. I do think that the Constitution is like a B- weapon. That might seem really weird, but you know, it is a good weapon. I am happy with all my C tier options, and then StA-11, I argue, is the worst weapon in the game, and I'm gonna stick with that. So well, chat, I'm going to call it here. Luna just want to say goodbye. I think she knew that it was the end of the tier list. If you haven't already, do consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel. If you have not seen, I have a new second YouTube channel where I'm going to be streaming Helldivers in the morning. It is very early morning NA, but it's like more like standard 9 a.m. Central European time for those that are in Europe. Come on by. I stream Helldivers basically every single morning outside of Mondays, and we typically sometimes play a second game later on in the stream. So if you want to just talk about this tier list or any other tier list, or just talk about the game in general, come on by. It's lots of fun. Thank you so much for watching. Link down below if you're looking for my Twitch channel or the alternate YouTube channel, the Discord, and yeah, much love. Peace out.